So, this week I can share a bit with you what I learned from all that ethnographic research, all that study. It took me several months to do that and to find enough people actually who had a Krugum Nayat, or they had a relative who had a Krugum Nayat, because everybody did not. It wasn't a practice that the majority of the people, and I was in Siem Reap, Cambodia, which is where Angkor Wat is. It wasn't a majority of people. It was just a handful of people, not a lot of people. But the people that I talked to about it would say, oh, that is a very ancient practice. They recognized it as being before Buddhism, and before Buddhism in Cambodia there was Hinduism. Before Hinduism, they would say, oh, they worship the spirits and all those things. So they recognized animism as being very old. They're a very old religion. And come to find out that my friend Lucky and his wife each had a Krugum Nayat. It was made for them by a what we would call in English like a witch doctor, who would create this object and invoke a spiritual entity to come into that object as a protector. And turns out that Lucky had one made for him from the witch doctor. His father had one, and you remember many years ago when the Vietnam War was going on, Cambodia also had the killing fields, and they had Pol Pot, and they were killing people, and all that was going on. And during those days of the war and the genocide, Lucky's father had one of these objects, had a Krugum Nayat, had this spirit that protected him, and he lived through the war. He gave honor to that spirit and said that he survived because of that kind of spirit. So this was passed on from Lucky's father to his family. So this was a family spirit. And I came to understand, after doing all the ethnographic research and talking to people about it, that a lot of people would get one when they were in dire circumstances. They were in a very difficult situation, and where they had a terminal illness or nothing worked. This was one of the last-ditch efforts they used. But like for Lucky, he didn't have that. He just worshipped it because it was a family thing. In the object, of course, it was more than the object. Just looking at the object, you could burn the object, but you wouldn't burn the spirit that was associated with the object. The spirit was still there. And people would talk to me, and they would delineate the benefits of following that spirit, that entity. Oh, there was peace, there was stability, there was protection, there was provision. They knew that they were being watched over by it. They were under its watchful eye and its care. They also equally knew the obligations, what they could not do, what they could do. They understood the obligations of following this spiritual entity. For instance, my friend Lucky knew that he should not drink beer. He could not do that. He knew when he could leave the house and when he could not leave the house, when it was safe and when it was not safe. And so they gladly followed the obligations in order to get the benefits of this relationship. Well, here's where I want to introduce to you another concept that is important for you to know in intercultural communications, and that is the concept of patronage. When I understood what was going on, the benefits and the obligations and how they felt protected under this spiritual entity, then I realized, oh, this is patronage. Now, we don't have this concept much in America and in Western culture, except in the past, where if you had an artist, they might have a patron that funded their work, and they could not do their work without the patron. In ancient cultures, patronage was very, very common. The wealthy would support the less wealthy. The people knew they were clients, the patron and the client, and the client knew what to do to please the patron. So if you go on to study patronage, and it's pervasive in so many cultures. It's just like one of those foundational things that runs through a lot of cultures. If you work cross-culturally and you find that people are coming to you and they're giving you a gift or they're seeking your time and effort, they may be looking at you to see if you are going to become their patron. So you need to research patronage and understand this concept before you work overseas, or you're going to get into a patronage relationship and not realize that you're part of one. And what is involved, what are the obligations on your part, what are the benefits that you're supposed to give. Because no matter how poor we are as missionaries, we're going to be oftentimes more well off than the people that we visit, that we communicate with, and that benefit, that resources that we have give us a status, and they can seek the benefits of that status. At any rate, so I understood patronage. I had studied patronage, and this is something you need to study and know about if you're going overseas. I recognized that this was patronage. This was your usual patronage that you see in Asian countries and countries around the world, but it was the spiritual form. Instead of depending on a person, Lucky and my friends who had a Krugam night were depending on a spiritual entity. So I termed it spiritual patronage. And that is the way that I look at animism from now on. It is a relationship with a spirit, getting the benefits, fulfilling the obligations. Excuse me, I'm outside again. And getting all that relational thing. And so, in understanding that and what the Krugam night meant to Lucky and his family, I was not asking them merely to give up an object. I was asking them to give up a relationship. And we need to know that when we're sharing the gospel, what we're asking people to do. If we're asking them to give up a relationship, we have a substitute relationship. And to make that clear and to help them to understand and fill the void of what we're taking away from them by having this relationship of this entity that cares for them. We'll talk more about it